don't even realize. We often talk about it in science, where the more you get into science, the more irrefutable it is that it is extraordinarily there's extraordinary intelligent design. When you look at health, you see that our bodies, being fearfully, wonderfully made, have a capacity to heal that is amazing beyond any comprehension. And when you look at the news of the day and you reason things out through logic, all of the happenings seem to point to a bigger story. And I would also argue that we're all looking for something a little deeper. And that's where my friend Mark comes in, because recently he wrote an article talking about spirituality versus religion. Mark Griswold today, our off the wall commentator. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Michelle, always good to be here.
Indeed, and it's good to have you. Your blog, I really was fascinated by it. Spiritual, but not religious. You point out that religion is, in essence, rules upon rules. In fact, I thought after I read it, I came up with the phrase "religion" is what we should probably call it.
Yeah.
That it's so many rules. So in religion, why do people shun the idea, like you point out, of being spiritual but not religious? And what does that phrase actually mean to you?
Well, I think it can mean different things to different people, and both can be right. Everything can be a double-edged sword. And certainly growing up in Seattle and being surrounded by, Seattle's one of the most unchurched places probably on the planet, to be honest.
Yeah, it's in the top
Uh,
of unchurched, dechurched, and
yeah. And
atheistic.
not just, not church going, but just flat out they don't believe in God. They have no religion or no spirituality. Some of them are flat out atheists. But
Mhm.
there's a lot of people that are, they'll say, well, I'm spiritual but not religious. And if you dig deeper, that's code to, well, I just believe that everything's okay and you can do whatever you want as long as you're a good person. And that's my definition of a good person, not your definition of a good person. And my mind is so open, my brain has fallen out, right?
We can get
And
that way. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, yeah. But then there's also the spiritual but not religious that Jesus, I believe, came to teach, where he was hammering, the people he hammered on most were the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who were all about the rules. And, you gave me the topic of, you were going to talk about Christianity, cults, and I can't remember what your phraseology
Culture.
was a couple weeks ago. And I was thinking, what am I going to do with this? I don't know. And then last weekend at church, our pastor was preaching on the Sabbath. In fact, he's preached on it the last 2 weekends. And he started off talking about in, I'm blanking. What's the name of the Jewish book that's not the Torah,
The Talmud.
the Talmud, and all the rules? Basically, I was thinking, the government, the legislature passes laws, and then each administrative body passes regulations that kind of interpret the laws. So that's kind of what happened. Is God put down the 10 commandments were the big ones. There's certainly more within Deuteronomy and Leviticus and all that. But then the Pharisees and the religious leaders of the Old Testament took that even further and interpreted those laws. So one of the laws was keep holy the Sabbath. And that's the one in the 10 commandments that's all about us. That's God saying, here, this is my gift for you. Take a day, relax, don't work. But the priests of the Old Testament, of Jewish law, took that, and I don't know, I can't remember, but there's like hundreds of pages of what the definition of work was. And one of them was you can only have enough ink to form 2 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. If you're forming more than 2, then you're doing work. Less than 2, it's not work. And there's like, if you're only allowed to take 2 bites of a fig, and if you took a bite of a fig and it didn't taste good and you spit it out, well, you still took a bite. So now you can only take one more bite of a different fig. And so it became so onerous that the day of rest became the most stressful day for the Jews. And Jesus came and, he fulfilled the law. He didn't abandon it, but he came up with all these things like, you guys, this is about me. So it's about following the spirit of the law, not the rule of the law. So, in terms of that, it's about spirituality instead of, as you said, religion.
Okay. So what that says to me is that God meets you where you're at. That religion can say, "Hey, you need to, if you want to know God, you have to look like me." Here in America, we've put a face on it. Some white guy sitting behind a pulpit, hellfire, brimstone, and probably if you have a southern accent, it kind of is a little bit higher up the scale of religion.
I
Um,
man.
you have to dress like me. You have to, and so we come up with our own ideas and rules. And so that's where I almost find it refreshing. You mentioned Seattle being unchurched, dechurched, atheistic. I live in that corner of the United States. And in a way, I'm going to be straight up and I'm going to offend you as you're watching and say, you know what? I find that refreshing because it's sincere. Because, whatever your ponderings are,
Uh-oh.
whatever your
Yep.
thoughts are, it's encumbered by this is the way you must be. And sometimes, I'm sorry, atheistic ideas can be religious in themselves. This is how you must be. But when you get past a lot of that, you get to something a lot deeper. And maybe that is that spirituality, not the religion of it, something deeper and something real. What are your
Right. I
thoughts?
was just going to say, I was thinking about the atheists I know and some of the agnostics that I know. And for the most part, they came from a religious background that was very legalistic. I have
And it
one
doesn't make
friend.
sense. So no wonder they're saying,
Yeah.
okay, I
I
can't
have a
believe
friend
in
who's
that.
a
That's not
Jehovah.
real.
She was raised Jehovah's Witness, and it was so oppressive and so abusive that she just said, forget this, I'm done. And, I think she's slowly starting to think, well, in conversations with her, she's more of a agnostic, not an atheist, but I
Well,
meet
that's
other people, right?
intellectually honest. Let's
Yeah,
just be real. I think most thinking atheists will often say, "Yeah, I guess you'd have to say you're agnostic because you really don't know," which really kind of makes all of us agnostic until we stand before the throne room
right.
of God. We really don't know. However, evidence is overwhelming, and I can say with surety in my life, yeah, there's a God.
Right.
But
Well, if it was just all there for us to see, it would require no faith, right? And that's why they
yeah,
call it faith.
boom, there you go. As I read your blog, Mark, I was pondering, which is what you want to do when you write a good piece, right? It gets people thinking that all religious thinking, all it does is it has us follow rules to bring us closer to God or nirvana or consciousness or one with the universe or the spaghetti monster or that the force would be with us. No wonder why they say that all roads lead to heaven, because it's kind of like, well, it's kind of the same no matter what. It's just rules to get you to this place. And it almost seems like it's really you're saying it's the opposite, that we get close to God and then all the things that we should be doing that are maybe the groundwork for a good life kind of fall into place.
Sure. And I want to step back and say that rules aren't unimportant. The key though
True,
is
true, true.
what's coming from your heart, right? Are you following, in fact, in my Bible study this morning, we were just talking about this. Are you following the rules that God has given us? Because did give us rules. Are you following them so you can get into heaven? Or are you following them because you love God so much you don't want to disappoint him? And then the other part of that is all the rules that God gave us are for our own good. And it's not, God doesn't punish sin. Sin punishes itself. You touch the hot stove, that's God not saying, I want to punish you for touching that hot stove. No, the stove's hot, so you're going to get burned. If you use drugs, you're going to feel like garbage. If you sleep with tons of different women or men, you're going to lose your soul. It's just a fact of how God created us. And you can say that that's God punishing us, or you could just say that's
That God
the
has a
result
better
of,
way, that there
yeah,
really is a better way. And I guess the logical outcome of what you're saying, though, is that God cares more about having a relationship with you and then helping to align your life with what is the healthiest and the best and the greatest for a great plan and purpose in your life. It's not about someone coming to you and saying, okay, well, since you know there's a God now, you need to look like me and this is what you need to do, because God takes those things one step at a time. He really cares about who you are, where you're at right now. He loves you exactly where you're at. And that goes beyond religion. You say in your blog, those who only seek to follow the letter of the law will be worshiping the law and not he who created it. That's my favorite. That's a notable quotable right there, Mark. I like
Thank you.
it.
Well, I learned the 10 commandments way back in grade school, and we'd interpret them. We had to do in school, what does this actually mean to you? And I remember the first commandment, thou shalt not worship any other God, no false idols, right? And I think everybody in fifth grade said, oh, well, don't bow down to a little statue, right? Well, I guess the ancient Israelites were bowing down to a golden calf, but most of us today don't really make golden calves to worship. So I think us fifth graders all thought, oh, well, that's not really a problem. We don't worship little golden calves. But we don't realize that that's the first commandment for a reason. It's because we all worship false idols all the time. We worship, our jobs. We could even worship good things, right?
Politics.
Politics, certainly. We can even get to the point where we're worshiping religion, right? How many committees can I serve on at the church? And look at me. I remember talking to someone the other day and they said, oh yeah, growing up, we had hey, how many people have you saved? Let me put that notch in. Well, it's not about that, because guess what? You didn't save anyone. God did. Maybe you planted the seed, but yeah, people get so obsessed with the rules that they're, look at me. The Jesus would always say to the Pharisees, you guys have earned your reward here on earth because you're standing on the corner preaching and saying, look at how holy am I? Well, that's good for you. That's your reward. So you don't get one in the afterlife.
As we talk today and wind up our time, we're going to be continuing our broadcast later, talking with a gentleman who's gone all over the world and has found that every single culture, every language, every people, every indigenous group has an understanding, even if it's just basic, of this amazing God who created all things and who desires a relationship with us. Even every religion, to a degree, tries to find it, but it's as though everything that we're really looking for culminates in the person and the work of Jesus Christ. I know that's a controversial thing to say, and as we're broadcasting live on Facebook, people are going to go, oh, I can't believe you said that. But there's something uniquely different about the gospel of Jesus.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, the difference between Christianity and all the other religions, as long as we're following Jesus and not some Christianity that we decided to make up in our own
religion
rules, is that it's not about the rules. It's about a relationship with Jesus. And he comes to us first and says, you guys have a free pass. I've taken care of it. Whereas every other religion, and there maybe, I don't know all the religions, so, maybe the flying spaghetti monster religion is different, but you don't have to follow. In order to get into heaven, you have to follow the rules.
Well, it's a little bit different in that Jesus fulfilled those rules for us, and we come by grace and not by works. And it's a life-changing thing that happens when that light comes on. And of course, as you're listening, you are welcome to chime in with your thoughts or even your questions. This is the God story that I'm sharing today, and maybe you're on a journey finding that God story in your own life, and maybe this has touched something or you have questions. Well, we're here for you. You can go to MyMichelleLive.com. I'm not a theologian. I'm not someone important. I'm not this grand apologist. I'm just me, but I'm willing to talk to you about it. because to me, this God story is freaking amazing. And so is Mark Griswold, my friend, my buddy, broadcasting from the Idaho area where freedom reigns. Thanks, Mark, for joining us today.
Thank you, Michelle.